For 5 decades, the official line remained the same. UAP sightings were the result of swamp gas, weather balloons, or thermal inversions. The Department of Defense maintained this public-facing posture to ensure every report was treated as a trivial, explainable event. Behind the scenes, intelligence agencies enforced silence by targeting the credibility of their own personnel. Pilots who reported encounters with high-performance objects were grounded, subjected to psychiatric evaluations, and had their military careers ruined. This strategy engineered a cultural environment where anyone discussing non-human intelligence was viewed as a lunatic. By mocking witnesses and manipulating media coverage, the government ensured that the subject remained toxic to serious scientific or political inquiry. The deception served one specific purpose: to maintain the illusion that the United States government possessed total authority and control over the skies. The wall of secrecy collapsed in the summer of 2026. A sudden shift in policy led to an executive action that forced the immediate disclosure of the nation's most sensitive intelligence. President Trump signed the order mandating the declassification of these archives. This directive established a public database for all documented encounters, removing the layers of red tape that had protected the program for generations. In a single upload, the Department of War launched the Pursue portal. They released over 160 high-level files, making decades of secret investigations available to the public. Unlike the blurry, inconclusive radar footage of the past, the Pursue archive contained clear, cross-referenced evidence. These documents provided the first officially sanctioned proof that non-human technology is operating on Earth. The files prove that space agencies were aware of these anomalies long before the public. For decades, telemetry and photographic data from lunar missions were filtered to remove evidence of non-human activity. Among the Apollo 17 records are reports of geometric structures on the lunar surface. Astronauts documented formations that showed clear signs of an artificial origin, sitting in plain sight on the desolate landscape. The phenomenon was not limited to deep space. One of the most sensitive files reveals a documented encounter that occurred within the borders of the United States. In 1967, a military unit in a Virginia forest reported a face-to-face confrontation with non-human entities. The report describes a glowing silhouette that remained motionless even when illuminated by a sweeping flashlight beam, an event witnessed by multiple armed personnel. These records confirm the government knew that non-human intelligence was operating without restriction, observing our military assets and mapping the planet. While the public was told these objects didn't exist, the military was studying them in underground facilities. These black-budget operations were designed to reverse engineer technology that functioned outside the known laws of physics. The sheer volume of technical data required a $500 million contract with Scale AI. The company was tasked with using advanced artificial intelligence to process and decode the non-human telemetry recorded over decades. The center of this effort was a program called Immaculate Constellation. This was a crash retrieval operation that hoarded recovered UAP hardware. The program's files describe propulsion systems that generate thrust without combustion, exhaust, or internal heat, suggesting a power source that does not rely on chemical energy. The energy density required for such flight would replace the power grids and fuel supply chains that underpin the modern world. By keeping Immaculate Constellation hidden, a small group of officials maintained a monopoly over technology that would render the global energy economy obsolete. Intelligence officials fought to block the 2026 release to protect a specific statistical summary hidden at the bottom of the Pursue vault. Despite trillions in funding and government AI sorting hardware, the analysis hits a hard limit. The Department of War admitted 40% of data is unresolved, labeled beyond capability, meaning their systems cannot process the physics involved. This metric is a confession. It reveals that the most powerful military in the world has zero control over these objects, their capabilities, or their intent. The 50-year cover-up masked a chilling reality. The United States military is defenseless against these objects. Humanity is facing a technology it cannot understand, cannot track,
and cannot stop.
For decades, the subject of unidentified flying objects was managed through a policy of marginalization. Official government statements traditionally attributed sightings to weather anomalies, optical illusions, or civilian misidentification. That pattern of dismissal changed during the 2024 and 2025 U.S. congressional hearings. Under the threat of perjury, witnesses provided testimony that replaced speculative theories with sworn evidence. These witnesses were not amateur observers. They were active-duty military personnel, veteran intelligence officials, and aerospace specialists who risked their careers to enter their experiences into the public record. This institutional shift indicates that the government is no longer debating the existence of these objects, but is instead treating them as a verified national security concern. In November 2024, former defense official Luis Elizondo testified that the United States government has maintained secret programs dedicated to the retrieval of crashed UAP hardware. Testimony further revealed a classified program known as Immaculate Constellation, which reportedly manages a collection of high-resolution visual data documenting these craft in operation. Representative Ana Paulina Luna challenged defense agencies during these sessions, questioning why such extensive data had been withheld from congressional oversight. By documenting these claims in an official capacity, Congress established a legislative record that corroborated many of the specific details reported by personnel in the field. The hearings moved from policy discussions to specific, first-hand encounters reported by personnel operating in high-security environments. In 2012, at Langley Air Force Base, former Air Force specialist Dylan Borland observed a 100-foot-long equilateral triangle craft hovering just above the tarmac. The craft, composed of a fluid-like material, jammed his equipment before ascending to the altitude of a commercial jet within seconds. It performed this maneuver without an audible sonic boom or visible exhaust. In 2023, Navy Senior Chief Petty Officer Alexandra Wiggins reported a self-luminous orb that emerged from the ocean near the USS Jackson. The object was tracked on multiple sensors before accelerating out of range. Air Force veteran Jeffrey Nusatelli documented incursions at Vandenberg Space Force Base, where large objects approached military personnel during sensitive National Reconnaissance Office launches. These separate documented encounters describe a technological profile that functions outside the known constraints of current human aerospace engineering. The effort to report these incidents often resulted in professional and personal consequences for the service members involved. Dylan Borland's attempt to document the Langley incident led to over a decade of institutional pressure. Intelligence agencies manipulated his security clearances and employment records, effectively blacklisting him from his career path in the defense sector. Witnesses testified that these were not isolated events, but part of a protocol designed to maintain the secrecy of legacy programs by discrediting the personnel who encountered them. The institutional response prioritized the preservation of secrecy over the welfare of the soldiers reporting the incursions. One of the most significant revelations from the 2025 hearings took place when discussing the military's direct engagement with these objects in a combat environment. Representative Eric Burleson presented military drone footage from October 2024, captured off the coast of Yemen. The footage shows an MQ-9 Reaper drone locking its targeting systems onto a high-speed, glowing orb. The drone fired a Hellfire missile, achieving a point-blank hit on the target. The missile shattered against an invisible barrier. The orb remained intact and moved away, carrying the debris of the missile with it. This engagement indicates that current defensive systems are unable to damage or deter this specific technology. The transparency achieved in these hearings came at a high cost to the whistleblowers who chose to testify. As the previous policies of disinformation lose their effectiveness, the public is left to consider the reality of vehicles operating in global airspace without military interference. If these objects represent an intelligence that global military powers cannot influence or understand, the question of who maintains control of the airspace remains. Congressional disclosure marks the transition from a hidden mystery to a period where human technological supremacy is no longer a certainty.
We spent 100 years pointing giant metal ears at the sky, waiting for a whisper from the dark. The scientific search for life was built on a specific assumption that another civilization would reach out through a radio wave, traveling across light years of space before finally washing over our planet. For generations, we stared into that silent ocean of stars and listened to the static. While the math suggested the universe should be teeming with life, the total absence of a signal led many to believe humanity was alone in the cosmos. This focus on the distant future obscured what was happening in our own atmosphere. By treating first contact as a mathematical probability light years away, we overlooked the data accumulating right here at home. In 2026, the search for life moved into the halls of Congress. A series of sworn testimonies replaced the hunt for deep space signals with a review of domestic sensor data. These hearings presented classified records that challenged the established understanding of space exploration. The data suggested that the most significant evidence of non-human intelligence had already been gathered. This evidence was documented within our own atmosphere. Military instruments recorded objects traversing domestic airspace with capabilities that the intelligence community could not attribute to any human source. This shift in location forces a new tactical assessment. While radio signals from distant stars are a scientific curiosity, the presence of unknown entities within our borders is a matter of national security. For decades, an entrenched intelligence bureaucracy and a series of black budget programs maintained a wall of silence around these sightings. That silence ended when military insiders stepped forward to testify under oath. Individuals like Luis Elizondo and Dylan Borland provided the specific details necessary to force these records into the public record. Their testimony exposed the existence of deeply compartmentalized retrieval operations. One specific program, known as Immaculate Constellation, was revealed to be the primary hub for tracking and studying these incursions. The evidence presented moved beyond civilian anecdotes, relying instead on high-fidelity tracking from military hardware. This included sensor logs from MQ-9 Reaper drones that had locked onto objects performing impossible maneuvers. The barrier to discovering this intelligence was never a lack of technology. The data existed for years, held back by a deliberate effort to keep the truth from the public. To process the sheer volume of sightings, the intelligence community utilized advanced AI to categorize decades of UAP data. These systems successfully identified drones, weather balloons, and sensor errors. However, even after filtering for every known human and natural explanation, 40% of the data remains unresolved. When asked to explain this 40%, officials used a carefully worded defense. They maintained there was no definitive proof of extraterrestrials, a phrasing that allowed them to avoid using the word alien while the data sat right in front of them. Yet the same reports admit these objects accelerate at speeds that would crush a human pilot and operate without any visible means of propulsion. The government confirmed these crafts do not belong to the United States, Russia, or China. This admission carries a heavy logical weight. If the objects are not human in origin and they ignore our laws of physics, we are left with the reality of a superior, unknown intelligence. The release of the PURSUE portal files provided a paper trail of the secrecy. These internal communications show how the government tracked these incursions while publicly denying their existence. Records suggest officials maintained this silence because they believed the public was unprepared for the truth. They feared the psychological impact of revealing human technology is no longer the atmospheric ceiling. This disclosure brings a new kind of vulnerability. It reveals that trillions of dollars in defense spending provide no protection against objects that can enter and leave our airspace at will. The transparency challenges our position as the dominant force on this planet. We are forced to acknowledge that our most advanced defenses are effectively decorative when compared to the technology now being documented. We are entering an era where human science and military power have been publicly humbled. Our understanding of reality has shifted from searching for life to studying a local presence. We no longer look at the moon and stars, wondering if we are alone. Instead, we face the reality of a local, uninvited presence operating around us for decades. For a century, we waited for a signal from the silence of the cosmos. But they weren't waiting in the stars. They were already here.